So chapter 5, first off, tell me what you know about inequalities. Anyone know anything about inequalities? Yeah. Yeah. So inequalities, the difference from what we've been dealing with first is going to be these guys are equal, and these guys are greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Kids get these mixed up all the time. Maybe you don't, but there probably is someone in the class, or I will have in the class, that gets these mixed up. The way I remember them is, do you see this guy right here? If I straighten that stick out, it makes a L. So this one is the less than. If you try to straighten this stick out, it looks like that, and that doesn't form an L. So that's the greater than sign. That's one way to help you so that you don't mix them up. If you don't mix them up, then you don't need that little tidbit, but there are plenty of people who mix those two up, and we need to know the difference between these guys. In the real world, do we deal with more equations, do you think, or do we deal with more inequalities? Think about it. Think about your day-to-day. I think we deal with inequalities way more than we do with equations. Reason being, when I was looking for a house, did I say, I'm going to spend $210,000 and that's my budget? If the house is not $210,000, I'm not buying it. Isn't that what an equation says? An equation says it's got to be spot on. It's got to be exactly this. Is that how would I be very successful in my hunting for a house if I approached it like that? This house is $209,999. Nope, not buying it. Everything I want. Yeah, 99 cents. And we'll even do the little trick that they do over at the gas station. 99 and 9/10 of a penny. Right? Like that's that little 9 that's on the stupid little thing. By the way, they make millions because of that little 9. That little 9 makes them a couple mil extra a year. So that's not the way we work in real life. When I go to buy a car, same philosophy. What do? Give ourselves a range. Sometimes we say, listen, if you went on right now, if you went on Zillow, and you were looking for a house, there's going to be thousands of houses. If I'm looking for a specific house, don't I probably know the range that it's going to be within? Like, I don't want a complete bomb of a house, right? I don't want something that doesn't have a roof, that's barely got any walls, and maybe just basically a piece of land. So I can say, you know what? Sorry if I'm talking about your house. You know what? I don't want my house to be less than $75,000. Because I'm saying that if it's less than $75,000, that's too much work for what I want to do. But I know that I can't spend more than $250. And maybe I go a little bit higher than my budget because I understand normally with houses, you can make an offer. So I go maybe a little bit higher, and maybe I go a little bit lower than what I probably am going to spend just because I want my options. But when I do that, that weeds out thousands of other houses that don't fit my criteria, and now I can look for what I have, right? Have you seen that on Zillow where you can look for those kinds of things? That's because that's that range that I'm going to be within. If I was talking about the X, then I would refer to it as a domain, right? Domain is what my X can be. Range is what my Y can be. So we're going to be dealing with inequalities, and we're going to relate back to some of our old stuff. So our first problem. This is a business, and this is their profits for a year. Notice, if you look at the way that they described it, they said in terms of P of X. Why did they say P for this variable? It stands for what? Hello? Profit, right? Come on. That's not that. This is profit. That's why they put a P there instead of an F of X. But what does it really still represent? Still represents a Y value. But it also tells you that this is a, what do I know about this right here? Because I wrote it in this term, instead of just a y, it's a what? It's a function, which means every x has its own y. So I know little things about this. Let's see what else we can tell about this. What is this right here? A negative. What is this? Even. I got negative even, so what do I know about my end behavior? Starts down and ends down. If I look at my graph, doesn't that match with what I thought should happen? With me on this. Okay? What are these guys? Looking at my graph. What is this guy right here? This guy right here, this guy right here, this guy right here. What are those guys? They are all roots or x-intercept. Those things that I just circled, these guys are roots, also known as x-intercepts. From my x-intercepts, what can I also find? What? I can find my factors. Yes? So because of these, do you see they give me my x-intercepts right here? How do I know those are my x-intercepts? What does it say right here? Y is 0, then x equals this. Well, what do I know about all my x-intercepts? My y is always 0. Are you with me? So basically, couldn't I, if I wanted to, couldn't I probably write this equation based on these guys right here? Couldn't I write it in factored form? What would it be? X minus 1.4. X minus 4. X minus 6. X minus 8.3. You with me? Let's review some other stuff that I could go over, just for fun. I guess if I wanted to. What do I know about 4? Couldn't I take the factors of this and take the factors of this? Are you with me? And that would give me all my possibles, right? And I would know that 6 and 4 would probably be in that list. Just talking about the stuff from all last chapter. How I get my possible roots, then I can test them using synthetic division and break this thing down. Okay? Alright, so let's talk about this. That's all old stuff. Let's talk about some of the new stuff, which hopefully isn't too new. If they said they want us to describe where the profit is less than 0, that means they're not making a profit. They're what? They want us to describe that area. If I'm going to describe that, don't I already know that P of X is what? Less than, less than 0. I want to find those spots on this graph. Well, what do I know about this line right here? What is that line right there? What equals 0? That is where y equals 0. All lines that go horizontal are y equals. So y equals 0 right there. Are you with me? And if y equals 0, they're asking me to find the spots where it's less than 0. So wouldn't that be this region right here? And this region right here. And this region right there. Are you with me? So how can I describe that in terms of x? What do I know? So what they did is they're just breaking this down. You're saying, okay, let's put that, these are key characteristics, right? This right here is a key characteristic, key, right? Those are my x-intercepts. Are you with me? And they put those on a number line. Right here, right here, right here, and right here. Don't I know that this, where my y is less than 0, is any time back here, where my x is less than that. So if I put it on a number line, it'd be any numbers this way. Are you with me? And what about this area right here? What would have to happen? It would have to be between here and between here. All those numbers would be less than 0. And what happens here? Have to be here or what? Greater. Are you with me on that? Because when I'm on my number line, what am I only looking at? When I'm on a number line that's going left and right, what am I only looking at? That is only my x values. Are you with me? I'm only talking about the x values. What do I already know that for this piece that I'm talking about? My y is going to be less than 0. So I can look up there and I'm going, okay, where does this happen? Are you with me? Now, from right here to right here, is that coffee cart? That was weak. So here's what they want. They want us to describe our x's. So let's look up here. They want us to describe our x's where our profit is less than 1. How can I describe this spot right here? X is going to be what? Less than, what did they say that intercept was? 1.4. Why can't it be equal to 1.4? What happens when I'm on 1.4? My profit is 0. What did we want it to be? Profit has to be less than 0. Is it allowed to be equal to 0? No. So can I put the one where it equals 0 in my x's? No, I have to exclude that one. Do we see the difference between being equal to and not equal to? Yes? So go ahead and try on your own to describe this part and this part. Hopefully you see that this region right here is 4 is less than x, which is less than 6. And this last region is x is what? Greater than 8.3. And if you look down at the bottom, that's what they finally got to. They got right here, which is your final answer. If you look at it, what does it say? When P, which is your y, is less than 0, which means that we are not making a profit. Here are the 3 scenarios that can happen. Either x can be less than 1.4, x can be between 4 and 6, or x has to be greater than 8.3. If I'm in any one of those areas for my years, I know I'm not making any money. Are you with me on that? Now, do you guys know we have something that I look forward to every year coming up after Halloween, between not Christmas, after Thanksgiving.
Black Friday.
Do you know why it's called Black Friday? What is it? What happens when your business is not making money? What are you in? When you're not making money. You're in the red. you're in the red. That's what happens if you describe, like if you go to your accountant and he's talking to you and he goes, dude, we're in the red. That means you owe money. That's not good. Do you know what Black Friday is intended to do? Get you out of the red and into the, what's it called? If your books are in the black, that means you're making money. So when I'm keeping books and I'm keeping records, if I owe money, I write the numbers in red. If I'm making money, I write my books in black. At the end, when I kind of do all my bills versus how much I make, if at the end it's owed, I write it in red. If it's in black, then that means I've made that money. It's a real quick way for me to look at my books and tell whether I'm making profits or I'm losing it. So they made this day called Black Friday for businesses to get out of the red and to get into the black. What are we doing right here? We are looking at this business over the years, and we're seeing where his books are in the red, and we're describing that in inequalities. For homework, you're going to do B, which is going to be talking about where this business is in the black, and you're going to be describing that. So that basically if I said, hey, I'm in business, and this is my model, I figured out that this is what it's going to look like. I'm in year 2.5. By prediction, by using math, should I be making money this year or should I be losing money? And you could go to the inequality and you go, well, that's where P is greater than 0. You should be making money. Huh? Yeah, should be making almost your highest point, right? Does that make sense? All right, problem. So you're going to do B. Because we're going to talk about where P is greater than 0. All right. Now we're going to talk about how we can use this to solve equations real quick. Do you see Samson right here did this problem one way? He said, you know what? I'm going to take this right here, and I'm going to break this up into 2 different sections. I'm going to describe this graph, which is this, and then I'm going to describe this graph, which is this part. Do you see this little subscript right here? You see those 2 numbers right there? Do they have any math value? Do you know what they are? They're just organizational skills. That's it. Because I'm going to have 2 different graphs up here. So instead of me going, hey, look at the graph, I can go, look at graph Y2. And if you look on your book, you see the Y2 is right here. You know that I'm talking about the parabola shape. Whereas if I say, hey, look at Y1, you know I'm talking about the linear one. They're just organizational skills. That's it. They have no mathematical value. This right here, he graphed on this equation because we're gonna solve these inequalities. That's basically what. Remember last chapter, we solved them, but they were equations. Now we're solving them when they're going to be inequalities. Did I talk about the only thing different between equations and inequalities? What's the only difference? I don't think I said that. One thing when we're using inequalities, just to remember for this chapter, I should have said this at the beginning. The only difference, you treat inequalities just like you treat equations. Meaning, if you want to move something from one side to the other, what do? Do the opposite, right? So like if I'm multiplying, how do I move it to the other side? Divide. If I'm subtracting, how do I move it to the other side? So you treat inequalities just like equations. There's one rule different. Does anyone remember it? Yes. Not add. Multiply or divide by a negative. It's a specific rule. If you multiply or divide by a negative, you must flip that sign over. That's an Algebra 1 skill, but I wanted to make sure whenever we start talking about it, I want to make sure we remember that, because that can pop up anywhere. It's fair game, it's been taught, but we need to make sure we remember it. Whenever you multiply or divide by a negative, you flip the sign. So if I gave you this, and you wanted to solve this really quick, just real easy. How do you undo this? Divide by negative 5. Divide by negative 5. What did I say? Divide by a negative. So here's how I do this to remind myself. As soon as I write divide by a negative, I don't write my next part down here first. I circle this guy, and I draw a little arrow. It's just a reminder to myself that when I simplify this, this becomes a x. This becomes a less than. And this becomes a negative 5. That's little cues that I put to myself to remember. Because I multiplied or divide by a negative. That's the whole rule I was going over. That's multiply or divide by a negative. The sign has to flip. Alright, so here's what he did. He graphed this. He graphed that. Well, what did we just say y equals r? What kind of lines are y equals? Huh? Horizontal lines. Do you see right here, the person went down 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 24, negative 24, right? And on this line, what does y equal every time? What does y equal every time I'm on this line? Negative 24. What am I changing when I go from this point to this point? The x value. But what do I care about the x value right here? What do I want? Y equal 20, negative 24 all the time. That happens every time I'm on this line. If I want my y to be negative 24, it's got to be on that line. My x can be whatever it wants. I don't care. I want my y to be negative 24. That's what this equation says. What kind of graph is this going to be? Because I've taken Algebra 2 and I've taken Chapter 2, what kind of graph do I know this is going to be? How do I know this is going to be a parabola? X is to the second power. Do I know how to graph parabolas because I've taken Chapter 2? Yes. What form is this in? Standard. These are questions that I need to ask myself. We've done this stuff. How do I know it's in standard form? Because it's got an A, it's got a B, and it does have a C. What's my C value? And why is that important? Because this is my y-intercept, if I remember correct. And if that's my y-intercept, boom, I can, because when he goes to do this problem, did someone give him this graph? What did he have to do? He had to graph it. I'm showing you how he graphed this. That's where this line came from. I'm showing you how this U was formed is because he said, hey, my y-intercept is 0. I plot that point. What else did he find next? Before I can mirror that point, what do I need to have? Vertex. How do I find my vertex in standard form? Opposite of B over 2A. He finds that, then he plugs that because that's the x-coordinate, he plugs that back into the equation and finds this y-coordinate. Are you with me? When he did all that, he realized that his vertex was down here. And he plotted that. How did he get this point over here? All he did was mirror this one. He counted how far it was away this way, and then he went this way. Yes? Now, here's the new part. All that should be reviewed. Here's the new part. How did he know where the x's were? Because this question, here's what this question is asking. This question is, I want to know what x's, when I plug x in and I simplify this side, I want it to be less than negative 24. Are you with me? So I want to know on this graph where my x's are less than negative 24. Correct? Well, let's look. If I look here, is my y less than 24? Negative 24. No. How do I know that this point is not less than 24? Because it's above that. Is this point less than 24? My y. Do I care about the x right now? I'm trying to find the x's where it's less than 24, negative 24. Are you with me? Yes or no? Is this point good? No. Is this point good? No. Any of these points. But all of a sudden I get to right here. And what do I know about those points down there? Those points are the x's. So if I put in any point in this little part of that parabola, if I put any of those x's in, what do I know my y is going to be? Less than negative 24. Are you with me? So, what would be my answer would be, if you look at he says, I know it's going to be between negative 4 and negative 3. Why not equal to? Because if you look, right here, if you put in a negative 3, what's your output going to be? Negative 24. If you put in a negative 4, what's your output going to be? Negative 24. And what do we want this to be? Less than. It can't be equal to, so it's got to be in between those two values. Does that make sense?